could you imagine a world where everybody is building and creating and thinking of different futures?
Hey, sweet souls, and welcome to Change Liscious, the podcast that turns life's hot mess into your next big yes. I'm your host, Hedi, work-life innovation coach, design thinker, storyteller, and chaos to success connoisseur. Around here, we don't just talk about change, we live it, we breathe it, we dance with it. So buckle up, grab your favorite drink, and let's dive into the wild, brave, and beautiful journeys of people who dared to remix their lives and came out tasting success. This is Change Liscious. Let's make change delicious. Richard, thank you so much for being here. We've met years ago, and I'm not going to say much from now on. I would love for you to introduce yourself. That's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. My name is Richard Perez. I'm the founding director of the Hasso Plattner D-School Afrika at the University of Cape Town, which started back in 2016, actually off the back of a workshop that you and the team from HPI did. I think it was in 2014, if I remember rightly. So wonderful to reconnect after all these years.
Thank you so much. What is change for you?
A lot. That workshop that I attended, I was at working in public sector as part of World Design Capital back in 2014. When I heard that there was going to be a workshop around maybe starting a D school in Africa, based in Cape Town, I thought I better attend. Coming from public sector, there was, sort of 25,000 people inside local government, which and at least in Cape Town, I felt would need design thinking exposure to practice in the mindset. And so I attended the workshop. I very nearly didn't attend the workshop because I was quite busy at the time. And since that day, it has been an amazing journey, just building the D school, linking into an ecosystem in Cape Town, in South Africa, and in Africa, getting to understand the vision of the Plattner family around design and design thinking and their passion for Africa and for making a change in Africa. And over the last 7-8 years, we have built an amazing team of people at the D School. I find myself in academia, which is an interesting space to be, having come An interesting change, yeah, having come from private sector and then having spent a few years in public sector. But I think what's changed is we are, we're seen as a lighthouse, as a enabler of building a design-led mindset, design thinking, innovation, creativity, in South Africa and on the continent. And it's really taken my own understanding of the limitations of design and what I was taught as a designer. I mean, my background was mechanical engineering and then product design. I've been in the design and innovation industry my whole life, but really just being exposed to this democratization of the design process and how every human being has the capacity to be creative and to design. And that's been a real aha moment for me.
Describe that. Can you describe that? What is this ability or the mindset?
We're born with a growth mindset. It's as babies, it's our natural instinct to survive and to grow and to learn. And we go through a journey in life which suppresses it, which through our peers, and it's actually, this is research from Stanford University. We go through a life where our growth mindset is shifted into more of a closed mindset. And that's through our peers and our parents and our teachers that we get exposed to. And at the D school, for us, it's about unlocking that mindset. And research shows that you can reverse that shift from going from a growth mindset to a closed mindset. Some of us go through an education where that growth mindset is nurtured, and you land up in art and design colleges, or you land up in creative industries. And that's what happened to me. I landed up in an art and design college in the UK at the Royal College of Art, and it was nurtured. My creativity was nurtured through the masters that I did there. And I landed up in an industry where it was something I did on a daily basis. And it wasn't just something I did at work. It was a way of being. It was just who I was. What I did with my life. It's what I did at home. It's what I did in my relationships. And this way of being as a designer was something which only designers that went to art and design colleges experienced, because they were the ones which were identified at an early age at school that you're creative and then you must go on this path, and those that weren't had to go on another path. And so there's a huge population of people out there who have their creativity was suppressed, and their natural growth mindset shifted into more of a closed mindset. And I think for me, the biggest realization that I've come to in being at the D school and just being exposed to the work that we do is that we all have the capacity to be creative and people, students, school people, school kids, university kids, mature executives leave the D school with the sort of aha moment that they realize that they didn't know they could do this. They didn't know that they could think creatively. And it's life-changing for them. They go through these aha moments. And I think in some ways the design industry or the design education industry has kind of done a bit of a disjustice in the sense that it's only chosen it's there's a chosen few that are allowed to think like this. And actually we should all be thinking like this because could you imagine a world where everybody is building and creating and thinking of different futures?
Natural, as you said, it's actually our nature.
It's our nature. And
crazy. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, in the ideal world, as a D school, we shouldn't have to exist. This should be foundational.
Yes.
But it's not foundational, and we do exist. So there's a lot of work to be done. And I think you'll always need a technical designer of some sort, somebody who, okay, AI is disrupting that, but that traditional furniture designer, graphic designer, product designer, vehicle designer, the civil engineer, the mechanical engineer, you're always going to need somebody that has a technical expertise to design and build something. So we're not trying to turn everybody into professional designers. We are wanting to teach people to see the world through a design lens. And we're wanting them to be able to practice design at a level that makes them more curious, makes them more resilient, makes them more comfortable with uncertainty, to come up with ideas and try those ideas. And if they fail, don't give up. Try something else and to build that grit and that tenacity. That's what we're trying to teach here, so they become more creative and more collaborative, and they communicate better, and they're better critical thinking.
What are the crucial keys to unlocking those abilities that actually are natural to us and basically unlearn to unlock again? Is that correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I go back to my own educational experience. So I did 4 years of mechanical engineering, a very traditional math, science, chemistry, physics. And, you'd walk out of a maths exam, and if you didn't get 17.54 meters per second squared for that answer, you were wrong. You got zero. And there was only one right answer, and I was trained to fear uncertainty and to fear failure because if you failed, you got it wrong. And then fair enough in engineering, you don't want to build a bridge that falls down. Lots of the consequences of engineering failure are huge. So I fully get and understand the importance of what they were teaching. But as an engineer, what I wasn't taught was how to ask perhaps the right questions. So if I had been tasked to design a bridge, I had been trained to design that bridge. Absolutely. Don't make sure it doesn't fall down. Choose the right strength of concrete, the right span, and ensure that the forces and the balance is all correct. But what I wasn't taught was to ask the question, why do I need to build a bridge? What's the purpose of the bridge? Is there perhaps a better way of getting from A to B than a bridge? What about a tunnel? What about a hot air balloon? What about a teleporting machine? What do I even need a bridge?
And the opportunities to design and to have a different kind of idea and solution space, right?
Yeah, exactly. To expand, to ask the question, what's the purpose? Why? Not undermining the need, but just trying to understand, is a bridge, bridge is going to be there for a very long time. It's going to be there for 50 years, 100 years. Is something else we should maybe think about building, because the impact that bridge is going to have is going to be huge and massive. So let's think a little bit more about it than just go off and build one. And so that was the mindset that I had been trained as an engineer. And I mean, I can't speak for other disciplines like law or social science or medicine, but each one of us would have been taught a very specific way to how to see the world and the questions we should or shouldn't ask. I always had a passion to design. So after my engineering, I went off and did a master's in those days at the Royal College of Art. It was called Industrial Design Engineering. And it was actually a course for creative engineers. You had to have had an engineering degree, but they wanted to unlock your natural creativity. So they identified creativity because I had an art portfolio from school and I could draw. So, that was my license to get in. It has changed a lot since then. It's you don't have to be artistically talented to get in anymore. But I landed up in an environment where they recognized I had this very specific type of thinking, and they had to, in some ways, unlearn that and then build back up. And so my own experience of my brain being unwired and rewired comes from that experience that I had at the Royal College of Arts. And so, for example, the first year, all we did was they built confidence in my ability and capacity to create and do original
Wow.
things. There was no engineering. So we went to Rome for 2 weeks just to draw statues. It was like like an engineer sitting just drawing statues and drawing
Yeah.
structures.
Yeah.
They would send us into a workshop, and they would say to us, think of an experience that you've had, and now build a three-dimensional model by hand, not on computer, by hand, that represents the experience that you went through in watching that thing happen. So it's like very abstract, very creative. I had to like build. It wasn't about writing. I had to make it with my hands. And so there was all these little exercises that they
Yeah.
were doing where they would slowly sort of unlock this creativity that you had. And they weren't linked to a project. There was nothing pragmatic about it in the sense
Mhm.
of, I was trying to build something to solve a problem. They were just little exercises that were being undertaken to nudge my brain and say, hey, wake up. Remember that part of your brain that you used to have. And we spent a whole year doing these sort of exercises, and some of them, so there were methods and tools they were teaching us, and experiences, and they took that into a space where they then put it into practice. So they'll give us a bit of a
Yeah.
project to do, and then they would make us practice more and more, and then the more you practice, the more it became a way of being. The
Right.
more it became a mindset. This is just the way I saw the world. But it was continuous. It was continuously like drip feeding this to me. It wasn't just something I did for an hour, then we went back to engineering. It was just
Mhm.
over and over again. And so we went from tools and sort of activities to a process where we pulled it all together and we started to maybe design things to, and that was in the practice side, to something where it was something which became a mindset. It's just the way I would show up to a problem. And then over time, that started to build a mindset, which was something which is about a way, what I refer to as a way of being. Now, during my design education, they weren't teaching you this sort of the science behind what they were doing. And maybe there was a science, maybe there wasn't, I don't know. But they didn't say, okay, we're going to do this because then you're going to learn that, and then you're going to learn this, and then you're going to have this way of being, and then you're going to see the world through this design lens. So reflecting on that, that's very much what we bring back into the D school, is these sort of exercises where we start to build efficacy in people. That, oh my God, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know building a model was so much fun. And it came
Yeah.
to me so naturally. Initially they might think this is quite childish, but then you say, okay, now build a model of your workplace environment, of where the pain points, and then show where the pain points are. And they very quickly realize that building a model becomes a way of communicating a very complex situation. And you can co-create it. You can have three or four people building this thing at the same time. And so now you're collaborating and you are you're each person's bringing their own worldview, and they're not designers. These would be people in the office, will be the secretary or the MD. They're all at the same level now, building this model, and you're starting to unlock the power of design. And it's not the end object; it's the thinking process to get there. It's the mindset, it's the activities that you do. And so what we do at the D School is we focus on mindsets. We say, right, these are the mindsets that you're going to be taught, but we're going to go through a journey where you're going to make things, and you're going to test things, and you're going to break things, and you're going to collaborate, you're going to solve problems. But it's not about trying to solve the problem. It's about creating an attitude to how you approach a problem and how you work with your friends. If the solution emerges to be something very technical, absolutely, we're going to need to get in some technical expertise, but not right now. The early phases. Let's rather bring our natural creative thinking. But it does need to be unlocked. It needs to be nurtured, because a lot of people just don't feel that they have it naturally, and so they don't know how to contribute. They haven't been given the language. I was given the language at an art and design college, and I was very fortunate enough to learn that. But a lot of people haven't, and they've
Mhm.
gone through a career and lived experiences where we need to work with that and unlock it, and give them those aha moments where they leave thinking, I've got the confidence now to take on challenges. I can be a designer. I
Mhm.
can be a
Is that the core, the confidence to really go out into the world and whatever is happening that you can create? Because you said it so many times, the confidence. I think that's so
I
interesting.
I think it is. I think that's where you have to start, is build
Yeah.
that confidence. And a lot of people say, no, I'm not creative because I can't draw. You say, well,
Hmm.
being creative doesn't mean you need to draw. Do you cook? a meal, and they say, yeah. So, well, that's a creative process. You're in a kitchen, you're making something, you're building something. When you start, you might follow the recipe verbatim. You're not going to, like it says, 100 grams of butter. You will use 100 grams of butter because you don't want to fail. You're like, help. But the more you cook, the more you realize, well, it could be 110 grams of butter. It doesn't really matter. And or maybe I'll put a little bit of this, and you start to build confidence to explore and experiment. But you'll start off with something which is very risk-free. And so you can go through a process to get to a point where somebody says, oh, let's just throw this in and see what happens. And that's where the magic starts to happen. That's where the exploration starts to happen and the experimentation. And then you start to manage the consequences of failure. So, if you're just cooking for your partner, sure, let's experiment. I'm sorry if this doesn't quite work out, but I really want to try this recipe, but I want to try my own thing. Because the cost of failure is quite low. If it doesn't work, we'll get takeaways. But if I'm going to cook a meal for my boss and his wife are coming, I'm not going to experiment. I'm going to be quite careful. And so I'm going to manage. Maybe not going to experiment as much because the cost of failure is a little bit higher. People learn to build confidence in discovering and exploring, but also, managing the risks of it. So that here I can really explore, here I can't explore. Understanding the limitations of what I can and can't do. So I think there's these guardrails that you can put in place to help build the confidence. And it needs to be a journey of self-discovery. It's something you have to learn over time. It's a lifelong journey. And in some ways, the sooner you learn it, the sooner you'll be practicing it, and the sooner it will become part of who you are as a person.
Why is this so relevant right now? Why do you think?
Very good question. So we live in a world. Open any report from the World Bank, World Economic Forum, anywhere, UN. It will talk about a world which is complex, interconnected, changing fast. We live in a world, and one could argue whether the world's actually more complex than it was 3,000 years ago, because we have better tools now, but it's definitely changing faster. It's definitely more interconnected. There's definitely overwhelming amount of information out there. And so, let's call it complex as an environment to be in. There's a lot of research out there which talks about the traditional forms of logic and sense making that we typically had used were premised on a world which was actually quite stable and predictable. And the research showed that the world is not stable and predictable anymore, and these traditional forms of logic and sense making aren't enough. We need to bring different skills to the table now, different ideas, different approaches. And this is where creativity and resilience and grit and communication and collaboration, critical thinking, starting to play a much bigger role in being able to address these challenges, these grand challenges, these what they call the polycrises, all these interconnected challenges coming together and creating something which is just so complex to comprehend and so interconnected that trying to work it out, trying to map it out in a causal diagram or in a nice causal loop that because of this did this, it's just you just can't do that anymore. You get a bit of an idea of what's happening, but you're never going to fully understand. You might get a bit of an idea of some relationships, but it's too complex and it's moving too fast. So just as we work it out, it might have shifted, and tomorrow what we thought was a problem is actually shifted over there. So if you look at the skills of the future, World Economic Forum, they talk about creativity as being a critical skill that we need, no matter what profession you're in, no matter what degree you've taught. As human beings, we need to be more creative. But we're not. Are we taught that?
No.
Absolutely not.
That, I mean, if it's natural to us, can we just live it out?
Exactly. Yeah. What does it feel like to be creative in every aspect of your life?
Yeah.
And from the minute you wake up to what you do and to the way you manage your relationships, the way you bring up your children, to the way I see the world, none of this is taught.
Is it really a matter of teaching, or is it a matter of?
It's both. I mean, it's all very well teaching it, but if you can't practice it, then what's the point of it? So if it's not supported, you can't practice it. And so I think it's a long journey we're going to. I think AI has done a great job to us in the sense that it's it's coming to do a lot of these tasks which I believe will free us up as humans to start using other parts of our brain that we should have started using a long time ago. And that is the creative side, the side where we connect more as humans and really sort of start to stop and think and say, well, hang on, what's all this about? Why are we doing this? Maybe there's a better way of doing it. Let's experiment here. Let's try this. And so I think it's first of all, it's something that needs to be taught as being foundational, and then it's something where It needs to be allowed to be practiced and nurtured and supported. I think we've got a long way to go still in that space, but we've got to start somewhere. And I think if we, if you look at the grand challenges of the world, I think people are realizing that traditional ways of working and thinking don't work anymore. We've got to, the cannon is at the door. We've got to do something. Help. What do we do? There's creativity. Let's try that. I'm not advocating that it's the answer, but I think it's something which we need to start embracing more and taking more seriously. Now, maybe the word creativity is the wrong word to use. Maybe it needs to be innovation. Maybe it needs to be something that the traditional world understands better and feels more comfortable with. We at the D School focus on mindsets, where we say this is just a way of being. It's a way you show up to a problem. We don't want to get caught up too much with is this what you've come up creative or not creative? But what you're doing, is it leading to something new? Is it leading to discovering something and trying something different?
1999, I went to South Africa and was there at school for 1 year. And what it taught me, and I would love for you to comment or give your thoughts on that, because you're saying mindset and a way of being. What it taught me is really how people are very focused on their hearts. I don't know if you can relate to that. People in Africa, especially in South Africa, and what I've experienced in Namibia as well, they are very passionate, heart-centered speakers and creators. And when I came back after, basically, I was not unpacking my suitcase because I was not compatible. Like, I was at home for the first time in my life. And I know a lot of people are going through a lot of healing and coming home to their basically heart-centered approach of everything they're doing. And they're very challenged with the Western way of thinking everything through, as you said, planning everything, having to stick to strategies that they know won't make sense in 10 years' time, coming back basically to their intuition. So I don't know if I can phrase this in a question, but what do you think can we learn from, and what role model will Africa or African people or the heart-centered way of being and doing play for us in the future? What do you think?
Yeah, no, lovely question. So I think on our sort of voyage of discovery as a D school on the continent here, and our reference points were very global north. It was Stanford University, D school there, and Potsdam University, both funded by the Hasso Plattner Foundation. We initially adopted a lot of that DNA into the work that we did here, and we realized quite quickly that it had huge limitations, and there was definitely a contextually relevant version of this thing called design thinking. And Africa has been designing for thousands and thousands of years. Humans, we started here.
Exactly.
And so it's not that we need to be taught how to design from global north. We need to understand what's the design DNA here. And the heart sort of metaphor component was something which absolutely for us surfaced quite quickly in the need to connect with people and to build trust. You can have a technological marvel piece with the most amazing business model, but if people don't trust it, what was the purpose of that exercise?
Exactly.
All the technical people are super excited because they've built something amazing, and the finance people are super excited. But if it's not adopted because people don't buy into it, or they don't trust it, or they weren't part of the process, or they weren't approached, they weren't involved in decision making, it just doesn't work. And specifically, we see that with a lot of our projects here, that need for co-creation and collaboration and designing with people, not for people. I think probably one of the philosophies which has influenced us most, and it's not just a South African, it's an African philosophy of Ubuntu, which is I am because we are. And that's the thing. I can't exist without these people, my community. And Africa is all about connecting as humans and having a discussion and building the trust. And it's not just about designing a solution which we'll put out there and people will adopt. And so in some ways it can be frustrating because it's a little bit slower. There's a lot more conversation and debate and dialogue. But at the end of the day, if you're looking for real impact, those are the types of conversations and approaches which will last the longest. Ubuntu is about, I can go fast alone, but I can go further together. And that's so that human connection. And it's not just the mental human connection, it's not the brain, it's the heart, it's the passion, it's embracing each other as human beings and building that trust. So we power and privilege come into play with that, and how does that, who's the designer here and who's not the designer, and whose voice is here and whose voice is not here. It's all embellished in what we do at D school, and without that, I think we'd be teaching people the wrong thing.
Where do you see the future of really creating meaningful change? Who is the persona and what's the prototype? Like what are the principles behind it, and what are the personality traits?
So I believe that if we want to make a shift in the world and have an impact, we all need to be creating impact at our individual levels. We all need to basically be designing and tweaking and changing things. We can't rely on these centralized systems to do it for us. And so it's how do we capacitate every human being on this planet to realize the grand challenges and to do something very small, something very little, but just something, and not sit back and wait for central governments or central organizations. I'm not going to advocate to have the answer, but for me, what's the learning experience and the learning journey people need to go through? And it'll be different in different contexts. But what is that learning journey, and how do we get ourselves to that point where everybody is making a little difference, which will add up to a big difference? I think as a D school, that's just one intervention where we're trying to expose and access as many people as we can in getting them to see the world differently and building that, as you mentioned earlier, that sort of confidence that, okay, I can make a difference here, even if it's just picking up a piece of paper off the floor and putting it in the bin. That's making some sort of difference in the world. And I think that's where the solution lies. And so we at the D School, we talk about building sort of confidence in people to make a difference in their spheres of influence. So, some people have bigger spheres of influence than others. But how do we get people to that point where they want to make a difference and they feel they can, even if it is just as simple as picking up a little piece of litter and throwing it in the bin? I don't advocate for a moment that a D School is the answer. But it's something. This is an attempt to try something different, to see if we can shift the needle. It may or may not work, but at least it's something different.
At least we tried.
At least we've tried, and I think that's the very least we can do. And if it doesn't work, we will learn something. And the next time we try something, it will be hopefully a little bit further down the road in its thinking and its maturity, because we tried something and we learned from it, and we celebrated that failure. I mean, that's just teaching our students how to fail. It's like that's a very fun experience to do. People don't like to fail.
No, we're not taught to.
But it's through failure that we learn.
Yeah, exactly.
So how are we going to learn if we don't fail? But then again, fail early, fail fast, fail cheaply, the usual sorts of approaches, so that people can be confident that failure is okay. But our whole schooling system, we're up against everything. The schooling system, university system, the corporate system, it's all up against that. And not all of it. I think there's pockets which are doing some amazing stuff. But yeah, it's definitely there's definitely a lot of work to be done, and ourselves, like the D School, I think we just need to have the tenacity and the grit and the support of an amazing organization like the Hasso Plattner Foundation to just keep going, because it's an uphill battle. You're swimming upstream the whole time, but we feel really privileged that we can have the opportunity to at least try something. Try something different and just not wait for the solution to come from somewhere else.
That's a wrap on another Change Liscious episode, where transformation never tasted so good. If your soul's feeling fed, don't forget to follow, leave a love note, aka review, and share the goodness with somebody really ready to flip the script. For more juicy insights and sweet inspiration, follow me, Hedi Schaefer, and let's keep stirring up change that sticks. Until next time, stay real, stay bold, and keep it Change Liscious.